Welcome to Gripfast Artworks. I'm Christopher Leslie. This channel is all about sharing the methodologies, techniques, tips, and tricks of traditional art making. Now, the goal of this video isn't to suggest that you will be able to make very economical, stretched canvases yourself, but this will demonstrate how you can get a museum quality build for much less than the equivalent marketplace costs. Now you can see in this setup, I'm not using any expensive or complicated tools. I'm going to use basic hand tools to demonstrate how you can stretch your own canvas using common white pine found in any building supply store. Now, the reason why white pine is going to be used for this demonstration is because of the costs. Now, if you're first starting out, it's important not to select a species of wood based solely upon its strength, its hardness, or its durability. I'm not using anything sophisticated, or especially and definitely not anything expensive. Now, one of the great things about using pine is hand tools are fully capable of manipulating them quite easily without a lot of effort. Now, the wood that I'm using is a milled board. It's 1 inch by 3/8 inch square. The stretch canvas that we will be creating will ultimately end up being 8 feet long by 4 feet tall. The stretcher bars will receive a 3/4 inch rounded riser. And it's this riser the canvas actually physically comes into contact with. Aside from your wood materials, there are some other tools that you'll see me use in this demo. One of those is, of course, a power drill, along with an air compressor and a brad stapler. These are going to be the most expensive tools, but fortunately you'll have these tools for many, many years, so your cost per day over a span of years is very small. You should always pre-tap your holes for any of your hardware. Now, I prefer to use a coarse threaded drywall screw over any wood screw. Now, it might seem counterintuitive to avoid using wood screws specifically with a wood stretcher bar setup, but the wood screws just don't have enough grip. This prevents the wood to break, crack, or strip out when you put all of the pressure when you stretch the canvas. Another tool that's really important is to have a way to countersink any of the mechanical hardware. It's important to countersink all of the hardware so that when you apply your canvas stretch, none of the hardware is actually visible beneath the canvas. I stretch my canvases so they are gallery wrapped, which means you don't need to frame them. This is a way to present artwork that is very contemporary, but it also is very practical in that you don't have to spend on any type of framing system, which, let's be honest, can be extremely expensive. You'll notice in the image toward the bottom center are wooden dowels. Now, this was an experiment. In the past, I have used mechanical fasteners, essentially screwing the entire frame together, and this has worked really well for harder wood types. But I wanted a stronger, lighter, and easier method to attach my stretcher bars. I don't like using biscuits, nor do I like fussing around with wedges. So now my cheat sheet includes using these dowels straight out of furniture making. These sorts of dowels can be extremely strong, upwards of 600 pounds. The only thing to be mindful is that you need some sort of tool to make sure that your countersinking is precise. And you can see that I have some drill stops to the left of the dowels. It should go without saying at this point that we definitely need to be using more than just mechanical fasteners such as the screws, and that's when a good quality wood glue comes in handy. I prefer using Gorilla brand wood glues. I've had phenomenal results. They make great bonds. They're easy to clean up with just a damp paper towel, and their bonds last year after year, giving you a really good archival bonding system. And finally, we have our pneumatic stapler gun. Now, this is likely going to be the most expensive item aside from your lumber. This is what you use to staple the 3/4 inch wood risers on top of the stretcher bars, along with your glue base. Not shown in this picture, but immediately evident in the video itself, is that you need to have a way to cut the proper angles of all your wood. This is just a very basic, simple handsaw that your dad, your brother, or your neighbor most likely has hanging in their garage. I've had this saw for years. I probably should really have replaced it many years ago, but it gets the job done. Now, one thing that you really need to consider purchasing if you will make more than just a few canvases yourself is a way to properly make 45-degree angle cuts, known as a miter cut. You can see on my trusty table that I have a very inexpensive plastic woodworker's miter's box. This device allows you to insert the blade of a handsaw and make various cuts, 90 degrees and both sides of a 45-degree miter cut. It's extremely cheap and simple. You can always invest in future tools and buy expensive laser-guided radial miter saws, but for the beginner, simple tools work best. One thing that you'll notice in the video too is that I have a few various style of spring-loaded clamps. These clamps weren't special in any way for this build or carpentry in general. I do have fancier clamps, but these clamps are the cheapest versions that you typically find in an art studio. They're used to stabilize a drawing board on an easel, and they really make work a lot easier when you need that second hand. Last but least, you need to have a plan. Now, this can just be a very crude and simple drawing, like I have in the image of all the tools. But you need to know what you're building before you start cutting wood. Wood is expensive, and you should think about every cut as losing money as you build. You don't want to cut more than once, so be sure that you measure twice and always reference your plan. It's a good thing to have all the math done ahead of time before you get hot and sweaty, or when you're trying to measure with distractions like neighbors, lawnmowers, or family members. You can see me quite a few more times than I would like to admit in this video where I failed to mark my wood properly and I end up making reverse miter cuts, and I wasted a lot of time and effort doing this, especially as the day started to heat up. Even though I just said it, measure twice, cut once. Just briefly, I'll mention your work environment. I've built art pieces, sculptures, constructed canvases, and completed paintings in all manner of spaces, ranging from dingy, dusty garages that were built in the 1930s to shared spaces at university where your neighbor's paint splatter ends up on your freshly laid down landscape paintings. I've had studios in rental homes, converting living rooms. So there's really no wrong space as long as you can find a space. But one thing to keep in mind is that you should be free of distractions. I find that the fewer distractions I have keeps me focused on the task, and it really shows in the work. For this part of this canvas build, I'm on my back patio where I have enough surface area to lay down the lumber and make measurements. And the length of this canvas being 8 feet required a larger space. I avoided using the garage space because it gets extremely hot and I won't be very comfortable, even during the springtime when this was recorded. Now, I wanted this canvas to be 8 feet long, and coincidentally, the boards I purchased are also 8 feet long. So for the length, I'm already done with those cuts. That's just how they come from the store. Now, the height of the canvas, even though I've already determined it will be 48 inches, is really determined by the total width of my canvas that I have to stretch. I have a very large roll of 12-ounce cotton duct, but it's only 5 feet in width, which means safely I can only stretch a canvas that is maybe 4 3/4 feet tall as it hangs on the wall. To make things simple, based upon my 8-foot board length, I tend to make canvases that are 4 feet in height. But there is also another consideration, and that is transportation. The standard width of a full-size pickup bed between the wheel wells is right about 49 inches. So I really don't want to make a canvas that is for my own personal use any wider than that, because it will be very difficult and troublesome, if not outright annoying to transport. This also helps to regulate your studio space. You should be making canvases that follow a standard pattern. This helps to keep your studio space and your workspace tidy. In addition to making the proper cuts for the length and height of your stretch canvas, it's imperative that you include miter cut corner braces. On a canvas of this size, the forces, torque, and stored energy of the canvas stretch, especially using a heavy duct, really puts a lot of strain on the white pine, especially in the corners, so it's necessary to brace them. Additionally, it's also important to include a way to safely carry the final stretched canvas. This can be easily done by taking the full height of the canvas, which in our example is 48 inches, removing the 1 3/8 of the top and the bottom stretcher bars, and placing it in the center. This will afford a nice carrying handle, but perhaps more importantly, it will negate the inward pressure that the canvas will create when it's stretched over the long length. That sounds quite complicated, but it's at once obvious once you have your drawn plan, and even more so when I demonstrate the cuts and assemble the frame. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful or entertaining and you would like to see more in the future, please consider subscribing. If you have any questions about this build, what tools to use, or anything that we may have left out, we'll be more than happy to answer them in the comments below. Until next time, this is Chris for Gripfast Artworks. And remember, art is of a divine order through the power of creation.